Part 112. Return to 1990. Author, Guanwei 11 Feng. Chapter 1120. Latest website. This proposal has not been discussed before, but now that it is mentioned, everyone suddenly starts to chatter, especially the middle and senior management. If Wei Yandan, Zhu Lidong, and Liuqin can be kicked out, the people below will have a chance to come up. Once the team grows, there will be more and more people of all kinds. This year, many people are dissatisfied with these people, thinking that they just came in early, and their ability to talk about truth is not even the slightest bit worse. John glanced at Gudley beside him and asked in a low voice, "How is it?" "Just an idiot," Gudley said disdainfully. John glanced in the direction of Su Yorong, turned around and said, "I think there is a lack of supervision among the senior management within the group, especially the interest supervisors of the shareholders on the board of directors, even the secretary of the board of directors. Mr. Zhu Lidong works part-time, and to tell the truth, although Jiafeng Group is a large international company, its internal practices are still the same as those of a family. Chaos in top management is a huge drawback to the long-term development of the company, and everything needs to be standardized. Schroders has sent teams to some departments, but there is still a lack of leadership at the top. I think it is very necessary to add a president or director position. This position is not restricted by management and is directly responsible to the board of directors. It has the right to know the internal affairs of the group and report them to the board of directors." John glanced sideways and asked, "What do you think?" No one said anything at the scene. Everyone knew that the executives listened to Lu Feng. Now to arrange such a position, isn't it just to install a camera next to Lu Feng? After a brief silence, Yang Fukin in the back row was the first to jump out and shout, "I agree, I think it is very necessary." In an instant, all the eyes of the audience were focused on him. This engineer from the R/U0026D company could be said to have shone brightly today. Lu Feng turned back to look at him, and then looked at Liuqin. Facing Lu Feng's gaze, Liuqin forced out an awkward smile. This time, he really couldn't save him. He might have to stay at the group headquarters forever. For this proposal, if you think it is necessary, you can raise your hand. We are very democratic. As long as 50% of the shares agree, then this matter is very necessary. John raised his hand after speaking. Wei Yandan and others looked at each other. The scene was very delicate now. Su Yorong played with the conference pen in his hand and raised his hand. The representative of the Xiangjiang branch of Goldman Sachs Group not far away also raised his hand. Lu Feng stared at Su Yorong through John's cheek. She also looked over with a smile on her face. John smiled and said, "Exactly 50%. What does Mr. Lu think of this matter?" "I think this matter can be discussed further." Before Lu Feng finished speaking, John directly interrupted, "Let's discuss it again? There are a lot of things to do later, and the 120 million thing has not been found out yet." Lu Feng was immediately suppressed by these words. A smile appeared on his face. He raised his hand with a smile and said, "Approval. Agree. Should we set up a group director position, or some other position?" John thought for a moment and said, "Otherwise, let's set up a group executive president, one level higher than the vice president and one level lower than the group president. Then how about recommending Mr. Gudley next to you? Things have reached this point. It is obvious that the initiative is no longer in the hands of people like Lu Feng. Now it is up to others to decide who will be promoted." Feng Xiao was quite dissatisfied with Su Yorong's decision to vote for John. He frowned slightly and looked at Su Yorong, who was standing a distance away, and snorted coldly. When Su Yorong heard this, he looked at his angry look and said, "Humph. What? If your father were here and saw your behavior, he would probably be furious to death on the spot. Even if you die, my father will not die either." Feng Xiao gritted his teeth and said, "Traitor." "Traitor." Su Yorong couldn't help laughing for a moment, and whispered, "Come on, are you sure your father didn't tell you anything before you came here?" Feng Xiao remembered what Mr. Feng had said and sat there without saying anything, but he felt that such a scene made Brother Feng very passive. The scene went smoothly for Mr. Gudley to land in GFN Group and serve as the group's executive president. Amidst the applause, Gudley came on stage and said a few words in Chinese, saying that he would live up to expectations and serve the interests of all shareholders. Now the conference will proceed to the next item. The host glanced at the cards in his hand, raised his head and said, "As we all know, GFN Group is a young, powerful, and technologically advanced international enterprise, so this high-rise building is how did it rise from the ground? Don't forget to dig the water when eating from the well, sorry, don't forget the person who dug the well when drinking water. We need to trace the source and let GFN have history." Mr. Lu Feng, the founder of GFN Group, came to Suzhou alone in 1990 and settled in an abandoned factory. Since then, GFN Group has developed rapidly, with televisions as its main product, covering the country in less than a year. Jiangsu province, and then developed nationwide, acquired a copper company in 1991, and established a research and development company in 1992. Behind every step is the shadow of his struggle. I don't know how many nights they struggled and worked hard, just to let thousands of households use the best products. As the founder, Mr. Lu Feng can be said to have dedicated his whole life these days. He is a well-deserved people's entrepreneur. I want to sincerely say thank you for your hard work. There was a round of applause at the scene, and Lu Feng smiled helplessly and clapped his hands together. He had already guessed what was coming next. As the majority shareholder of the group, Schroeder Group knows that starting a business is not easy, so it specially created a dedication award to reward Mr. Lu Feng for his hard work. The reward is a Boeing 737 aircraft and a private jet. The private plane was finally delivered to Lu Feng. Following the host's invitation, Lu Feng stood up and walked towards the stage. As a result, the microphone said, "These words made me think I was going to get out. Help me recall my entrepreneurial history. The matter of private jets was originally a joke between Mr. John and I didn't expect it to become what it is today. In fact, I didn't want to accept it. I had refused it many times before. I didn't expect it. It's scheduled for today. Since it's hard to refuse such kindness, I have no choice but to accept it. After all, he hired a foreigner into my company, and he has a lot of history. That's all." Lu Feng returned the microphone to the host and walked off the stage amidst sparse applause. It's almost past 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and some group management issues have been discussed one after another. The first day of the board meeting has come to an end. In fact, everyone is not that concerned about today's affairs. Tomorrow is the highlight, year-end dividends, and everyone. Department budgets are all tomorrow. As the meeting ended, everyone stood up and walked out. Lu Feng seemed a little listless. Liuqin walked up to him and seemed to have something to say. Lu Feng spoke first, "Let him get out of here tomorrow." "Why don't we let them go tomorrow and have a closed-door meeting?" Liuqin said helplessly. Lu Feng didn't say anything. He stood up and walked outside. It was obvious that today made him very unhappy. Su Yurong walked in front and chatted with John. The two of them talked and laughed and waved goodbye to each other. John left. Lu Feng stepped forward and asked, "I don't see it, you don't know English, how can you have such a happy conversation?" "I have a translator." Su Yurong walked slowly and said, "What? Are you unhappy? You're happy. I don't know what benefits this will bring to you," Lu Feng said solemnly. "It's no good, but you know my importance now, and that's enough. Today is just an appetizer, and tomorrow will be the main dish. I just want to know that I am important." Su Yurong thought for a moment and said, "I remember that Mr. Feng gave you an ink painting in the early years. It showed a little boy playing with a dog in the yard." After Su Yurong finished speaking, She looked around for Feng Xiao. She didn't see it, so she smiled and said, I think that painting should be replaced by a little girl. By the way, is that painting still there? Always treasure it, Lu Feng said in a low voice. You've been thanking me for helping you find a lithography machine. My family has been living a relatively poor life in recent years, so I'll give them a few million for you. Isn't this difficult to do? Su Yorong asked. Don't worry, I'm very reliable when it comes to things. Lu Feng looked at her and said. Look, now I feel that your words make me feel very comfortable. The sky is higher and the sea is wider. Su Yorong breathed a long sigh of relief and said, what is happiness? Happiness is nothing more than playing tricks on others. Damn it. Happy mom. There was still more than an hour of rest time before the dinner. In a reception room, Lu Feng was sitting there smoking a cigarette. Wei Yandan, Zhu Lidong, Liukan, and Du Guoying walked in one after another. Are you all here? Close the door, Lu Feng ordered. Du Guoying sat down and was the first to speak. The other party wants to take action from within. Arrange for a standing president to come in. I'm afraid he will inevitably be caught in the future. Everyone should pay more attention next year and stop being casual about some corporate procedures, Wei Yandan reminded. Once the other party catches these things, they may make trouble at the board meeting and ask you to leave. Obviously, everyone is very afraid of this Gudley. These people have been following Jiafeng all the way. The company's rules and regulations mainly restrict the subordinates. They often do things first because of the suddenness or specialness of things. Second, follow-up processes, such as fund applications, misappropriation of budgets between departments, etc. These problems are small problems, but if you deliberately seek trouble, it will be a big problem. Wanting to compare other people's worries in their own work, Zhu Lidong had general worries. He looked at Lu Feng and said, Mr. Lu, try not to fight infighting if you can. Otherwise, Jiafeng will be a fragmented enterprise and will lose money quickly. Market competitiveness. Do I want to fight? Lu Feng looked at the crowd and said, then what should I do? Take the money and leave. Latest website. Return to 1990. Author, Guanwei 11 Feng. Chapter 1121. Latest website. Obviously, it is no longer a matter of whether to fight or not, but whether these people can stay next year. At the beginning, everyone felt that such a day would come, but they didn't expect it to come so quickly. If the majority of shareholders sided with Lu Feng, the two sides would be nothing more than a tug of war, with nothing more than tearing the entire company in half. Ending. Judging from the current situation, it is impossible to hold off for too long. John is dividing people within the company. There will only be more people like Yang Fukin, not less. The scene seemed a bit boring, and Lu Feng said to everyone, tomorrow's dividends must not be huge. If you have any ideas, you can tell us what you think. At this moment, Lu Feng could no longer directly make decisions to everyone as before. As long as one of these people was unhappy and rebelled at the critical moment, everything would be lost. Du Guoying said from the side, Mr. Lu, if we don't pay dividends, will the money be invested in research and development like last year? As soon as these words came out, everyone looked at Lu Feng. It was obvious that no one had any confidence in the bottomless pit of research and development. We will not invest heavily in research and development like last year. We will mainly focus on stabilizing the current situation. The stage of large investment can come to an end. Lu Feng looked at the crowd and said, I am not very optimistic about the future economic form, so having a lot of cash on hand is not a bad thing. How much is the dividend? Wei Yandan said slightly worriedly. Everyone is paying special attention to this issue of dividends this year. If it is too low, I'm afraid the backlash will be serious. Coupled with the appointment of Goodley, next year's board meeting will be troublesome. Lu Feng thought for a moment and said, about 500 million. Half an hour later, Everyone left the living room and walked towards the restaurant. Many of them were close to people like Zhu Lidong and quietly came over to inquire about how much money they would get. As everyone entered, the dinner party officially began. There were 10 tables in total with less than 100 people. Lu Feng, John, Su Yorong, Feng Xiao and others sat at one table in the front row, while Wei Yandan and other senior executives sat at another table. At the table, next to Wei Yandan was Gudley. The executives present are all smart people, and they can smell a different smell to any change in the top management. They know that they will never be able to surpass Zhu Lidong, Wei Yandan and other executives. These people came out with Lu Feng. But now that John, the major shareholder, is here, Gudley is simply the incarnation of John. He will become the second force of the group. As long as he follows him, in the future, Schroeder Group will control the company, and they will be Zhu Lidong and his like. As for the development of the company and its future prospects, they can't see that far ahead. They just want to climb higher, get more wages, get bigger dividends, and even go for a walk in the subordinate companies to get more. Jia Feng's life or death is really not important. Simple and pure workmanship. There was an endless stream of people coming to toast Gudley, and the atmosphere at that table was great. Lu Feng put down the chopsticks in his hand and stared at the table. John also turned his head to look. Feng Xiao looked back and said, "It's so lively. Let's have a drink too." No one at the scene echoed his words, which made Feng Xiao slightly embarrassed. Su Yorong smiled teasingly at Lu Feng and said, "It's really heartbreaking to kill people. I don't quite understand what you're saying. Come on, let's have a drink too." Lu Feng raised his glass, clinked it with everyone, and drank it all. John put down the cup and said, "Tomorrow is the time to announce the dividend plan. I wonder if Mr. Lu has any plans. Return the manuscript. Let's discuss it together. Now that I am not a human being inside and outside, do you think I will be given a lot of shares? Should I still be in the company? You think I will be given a small share? There are some big tricks working behind my back. What I hate the most is doing one thing in front of someone and doing another behind your back. After all, you are a human being, not a beast." Lu Feng felt quite unhappy and started scolding him at the dinner table. The entire dinner table was silent. Su Yorong was busy eating, while Feng Xiao had no idea what was going on. Brother Feng lost his temper inexplicably. The representative of Goldman Sachs Yangjiang branch said, "Mr. Lu, companies make money to benefit shareholders, and dividends are necessary. What's more, the company has developed steadily, rather than throwing money into some bottomless pit. Is it your turn to speak? You are a small shareholder, and it is a debt for equity swap. The company needs to develop, not just distribute the money after making some money. It depends on the future. According to what you said, Goldman Sachs Group's original profit: once you have money, you should share all the annual profits instead of growing into a world giant." Lu Feng scolded him. The representative of Goldman Sachs was scolded and looked at John. John coughed and said, "Mr. Lu, you need to calm down. All shareholders are equal. Since you said that small shareholders have no right to speak, you are in my position. Are you a small shareholder in front of me? I'm a small shareholder, but I'm also a resident of the board of directors. Okay, let's not talk about this. I don't agree with large dividends. This year's dividend can be more than last year, with a maximum of no more than 500 million." Lu Feng walked toward the dinner table. Others on the board glanced around and said, "I can say this, I am completely responsible for the company. If you do not follow this plan, the consequences will be serious. I hope you will seriously consider it." John heard what was said and said, "Mr. Lu, the board of directors is a place to discuss matters, not just one person's words. There is no need to threaten. I think there should be a big dividend and 9% of the account should be paid. 10 funds will be taken out and divided, and when the company needs funds in the future, everyone will inject more capital. It's difficult to take out the money after it's in your pocket. Lu Feng looked at him and joked, if I miss this opportunity in history, I'm afraid I won't be able to get the money even if I kneel in front of the Schroeder's headquarters. I am very supportive of President Lu and very optimistic about Jiafeng's future development, John said. The meal was quite unpleasant. John supported Lu Feng while insisting on his dividend plan. At around 9 o'clock in the evening, the dinner dispersed. Lu Feng returned to the room and was a little unable to sleep. He got up from the bed and gave Su Yu make a phone call from your room. Who is it? Su Yurong said lazily. It's me. Tomorrow is when the dividend plan is announced. Who do you support? Lu Feng asked. Su Yurong on the other end of the phone sighed and said, you said you would give me a sum of money, and I will definitely support you. If the money is divided, Jiafeng will fly away next year, leaving only a shell. It is in line with Shiluo. The interests of the German group are not in line with my interests. Okay. Thank you. Lu Feng hung up the phone immediately after saying that. Early the next morning, Yang Fuken and others who were originally planning to attend the meeting were told that today's board meeting would be limited to board members only and would no longer include group executives. This was done in consideration of the impact that so many executives would have on the group if they were gathered here. The operation has had adverse effects, and I hope everyone can return to their posts as soon as possible. Curses were everywhere for a while, and many people were asking if Lu Feng did not allow them to participate. The former leader of the company was now becoming an enemy in the eyes of this group of people. At 10:30 in the morning, Lu Feng and his party entered the conference room. Today there was a long conference table with a nameplate on it and tea in front of everyone. It looked quite formal. Hurry up and sit down. Lu Feng looked very relaxed and greeted the others, saying, there are far fewer people today, so there is no need to be so formal. Everyone sat down chatting and laughing. John saw Lu Feng chatting with Su Yurong for a few words. Both of them had smiles on their faces. He already understood in his heart that he would have nothing to do on the board of directors this year. Today, there is no host, so I will be the host. Today we mainly discuss two topics. First, the issue of next year's budget for each department. Second, the issue of dividends. Let's talk about next year's budget first. Last year's budget reached its peak. We cannot afford expenditures like this. Lu Feng said to everyone, fortunately, all the money has been converted into patents and talents, and has been reserved. Some of the money must be spent, otherwise we will lose the trust of investors in us. We have also encountered many problems in the development. The international society is constantly changing, and our overseas markets have suffered a major blow. Kevin, the person in charge of overseas markets, didn't come because he couldn't get away from work. However, the capital budget for overseas markets has to be reduced. The current international society is too unfriendly to us. The marketing department has been doing a good job in the past few years and the brand has been consolidated. It's very good and has become a brand recognized by people in many provinces. Advertising, marketing, and channel maintenance need to be strengthened on the original basis, so I think the budget of the marketing department will be increased by 20% on the original basis. The most expensive thing is the R/U0026D company, which cost 1.5 billion like last year. With the US dollar, we can't do that this year. Consolidating on the original basis, this year's plan is to defend. The company has developed to a certain scale. It will steadily launch good products according to the plan. It has to grasp the rhythm of the market in terms of product replacement, so this year's R/U0026D company's budget, I propose $500 million. Excluding some necessary expenses, including the internal improvement of the corporate headquarters building, investment in new factories, and interest payments on maturing debts, the biggest expense next year should be the mobile phone business, which will be the heart of the group's business, especially the exit of new brands. We cannot save money on marketing and advertising, so I propose a separate budget of 200 million yuan for the mobile phone business. Everyone has a folder in front of them, which contains the detailed budget and performance requirements of each department for next year. If you have anything you want to ask, if you don't understand, or if you object, you can tell me. Everyone opened the folder in front of them, which contained a detailed list of the performance of each department, subsidiary company, and branch this year, as well as next year's situation, how much money was budgeted, what goals should be achieved, or how much money should be earned for the headquarters. How much it costs is clearly written down. Latest website. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Return to 1990. Author, Guanwei 11 Feng. Chapter 1122. Latest website. Half an hour later, everyone had read the contents of the documents in their hands and expressed no big opinions on it. Lu Feng continued, as for the mobile phone business, I propose to hand it over to Du Guoying. The reasons are, first, mobile phones. The brand is the same as the pager brand. They understand the communication market better. Secondly, the marketing department is now very large. The mobile phone business needs careful care. I still hope they can make good home appliances. After Lu Feng finished speaking, he looked at Zhu Lidong. Zhu Lidong responded immediately, I agree. Du Guoying seemed particularly excited. With such a core business for him, his status in the group jumped to the same level as Zhu Lidong overnight. I will definitely live up to the company's expectations and do a good job, Du Guoying promised. Seeing that everyone had no objections, Lu Feng asked John again, does the major shareholder have any objections? That's not true, Mr. Lu has the final say, John said in a rather sinister tone. About next year's budget, no one has any opinions, so let's stop the discussion and move on to the next item, dividends, Lu Feng said to the crowd. Regarding dividends, there has been a loud discussion within the group recently, but I think this everything should be done based on the interests of the group as a whole, rather than one person's personal interests. The group not only needs to develop, but also faces risks. We are all corporate executives, shareholders, and heads of other companies. I believe everyone knows that the market changes and competition every year are extremely fierce. It is not that when the market stabilizes, it is like a money printing machine. How much money you make every year can be divided out. It is not only the market game, but also the overall economic situation. I don't need to explain this truth, right? No one spoke at the scene. Lu Feng continued, looking at the world's top companies, are there any dividend rates exceeding 10%? I believe it is difficult to find. Although we are not listed, we must ensure that small shareholders the interests of hundreds of thousands of workers of GFN Group. Large dividends are not in line with the development of the enterprise, nor in line with the overall interests, nor in line with the company law promulgated by our country in 1993. We are a large enterprise, not a small workshop. To be honest, who can make such a request? There is another possibility of being legally illiterate, that is, being really stupid and contemptuous of the law. No one dares to mention this kind of thing in European and American companies. It is just that some people think that there are many legal loopholes in this aspect of our country and there is insufficient supervision. Yan, in the hearts of ordinary people, the company belongs to the boss, and the boss belongs to the company. We also need to have long-term development goals, so I propose that this year's dividends can be increased, but they should be maintained within a reasonable range, 500 million yuan. Last year, the per capita was 120,000 to 30,000 yuan. This year, there are many more people, 500 million yuan. After all, it's still around 100,000 per capita. Wei Yandan was the first to speak. A year-end dividend of 100,000 yuan is already a top-notch income. There is no company that pays dividends every year. We are the only company in the country that can do what we do. But we are an international company, John reminded. You can't be extravagant before getting rich. You must be vigilant about this issue. Take a house as an example. What is the current housing price in Shenzhen? Lu Feng asked the crowd. Does anyone know? Du Guoying said, about 3,000 per square meter, a good location is about 6,000. Is it so expensive now? Lu Feng asked in surprise. The prices of commercial housing have been rising in recent years. Many people say that the rise is outrageous. Most people are waiting for housing prices to fall before buying, Du Guoying said helplessly. In other words, an average person can buy a house with 3 years of dividends. This is already a very good income. But those who can get dividends within the group are not top talents. The average salary of these people is about 100,000 yuan a year. John felt that he had no chance of winning this year. He looked at Su Yorong and asked, Mr. Su, what do you think? I have no objection to the dividend plan, but the board of directors must explain what to do with the remaining money. Even if this year's budget is excluded, there is still about $1 billion in idle funds in the company's account. This money is deposited in the bank. Will the account earn interest or be used for investment? Su Yorong asked. This money cannot be moved. It is stored in the bank. Why can't it be moved? Because I think there are serious economic problems in Asia. There may be a financial crisis in the next 1 or 2 years. Recently, many investment banks and well-known financial experts have issued warning, we must pay attention to the overproduction of industries and the hollowing out of industries in some areas. As a major Asian country, it is difficult for us not to be affected, not only by the international situation, but also by the domestic situation. The reform of state-owned enterprises has reached a point where it is necessary to reform. The constraints between the private economy and state-owned enterprises are very serious. A large number of jobs do not produce value. It is approaching the point where changes have to be made. Whether it is domestic or Asian, we are not optimistic. Which is why I want businesses to park a lot of cash. After hearing this, Su Yorong asked, since you are not optimistic about the mainland's economy in the past few years, and GFN has no overseas market, where will the future growth point be? The overall business structure of mainland China needs to be adjusted, but I don't think there will be problems with the economy. This adjustment is an opportunity. When there is an external crisis, many companies will look for better places to transfer assets. These assets are not money, but industrial assets are factories. First of all, the mainland's population structure is very young, and most of them have primary school or junior high school education. Don't underestimate these academic qualifications. Compared with neighboring countries and regions, they are highly educated people. This is an internal situation. An external situation, high-growth countries in Asia. The problem of industrial oversupply in China and the region is serious. Take Thailand as an example. Their manufacturing industry is developing at a rapid pace. So what supports their sudden explosion of such a strong manufacturing industry? It's foreign investment. Foreign debt. They borrowed a lot of money from international financial institutions, and foreign-funded companies moved a large number of factories to the local area. Production drives employment and economic prosperity. Are these foreign investments and foreign debts in vain? Of course not. The Thai baht is anchored to the US dollar, and foreign finance is fully liberalized. The international financial capital goes to the stock market and the futures market, just like returning to home. When finance loses its sovereignty, if you rely on subsidies to make up for currency fluctuations, something will happen soon. In addition, does Thailand have pillar industries? No, it is a vassal, producing cheap products for the United States and Europeans. The raw materials are imported, and the finished products are exported and sold. Such a country will collapse instantly if there is a slight disturbance. For example, the price of raw materials increases, the export of finished products, and the other side increases tariffs. For such a fragile country, its economy is like paper. The key is how many countries and regions in Asia are paper. Others didn't feel much after listening to Lu Feng's words, because most people didn't understand it, but John looked at Lu Feng with disbelief in his eyes. Schroeder's group made predictions about the financial cities of various countries around the world. John some time ago attended several internal financial meetings. The financial predictions of several financial tycoons in Asia are about the same as those of Lu Feng. Many developing countries do not have financial sovereignty. The economy in Asia is overheating, even if this economic model is just a layer of paper. That can be tolerated. The key is the turmoil in the international community. Soon someone will tear this layer of paper to pieces. The so-called monetary finance is a simple and popular metaphor. Your family is very poor and you print money and spend it yourself, but behind the money represents industrial output. For example, if your family prints 100 yuan, and your family only has 1 pound of pork, then this 100 yuan 1 yuan is worth a pound of pork. Even if another 1000 yuan is printed later, it will cost 1000 yuan per pound of pork, commonly known as inflation. The big households in the village are very rich and use a lot of food and drink at home. The main money circulating in the village belongs to their families, so everyone's money needs to be exchanged with the money of the big households in proportion. This is the exchange rate system. We are originally from a poor family. The whole family only has 1 pound of pork. How can we get rich? The best way is to work for a big company, and you need to have a foundation to work. You need tools, factories, knowledge, intellectual property rights, and buyers, major exporting countries. These things do not come out of thin air. In order to work, the poor went to the wealthy family to intercede, hoping to borrow some money. Let your factory go to my place, and let me sell my things to you. After hearing the request, the wealthy family said that the landlord did not have any surplus food. Since it's not impossible for you to sincerely want to be a laborer. If you want to make money, you have to kneel down. Kneeling down is not shabby. If something happens in the village in the future, or the village committee holds a meeting, you have to be a pawn. If other big households in the village make trouble with me, you have to go to his door to make trouble. You in my yard, Accountant Wang and Accountant Li can go there whenever they want. As a result, the poor man turned into a working man. The problem is that the money of the poor man and the money of the rich are unstable when exchanged. There are always a few digits after the decimal point that fluctuate greatly. Accountant Wang and Accountant Li come every now and then, and took away these fluctuations. When poor people make money, they don't learn skills or go to school. They just eat, drink and have fun, and consume all the money. Those small fluctuations gradually accumulate into a big hole. Originally, this matter was easy to handle, and the big family would lend some more money. Once the hole is plugged, you can be happy for several more years. The key point is that something happened around the poor guy. The area where the poor ghost's house is located is the former big family in the village. Although the former big family is a bit lonely, he has been working and studying in the past few years, and he is doing well. The front door and backyard are all tucked back. Something really happened now. The big boss thought that you all worked for me and didn't know how much you weighed. In order to scare the former big boss, he decided to kill the poor guy. That's basically what it means, everyone understands it. Latest website. Return to 1990. Author, Guanwei 11 Feng. Chapter 1123. Latest website. At the meeting, Lu Feng predicted that there would be problems with Thailand's currency, which would trigger an economic crisis. The domestic situation was also relatively complicated. At such a special historical crossroads, GFN must have a large amount of cash to face the unpredictable crisis. Others at the scene knew nothing about international finance and could only listen to Lu Feng. John was secretly shocked. He began to realize that this young man was really not simple. This is my reason for retaining funds. If you have different opinions, you can discuss it, Lu Feng said to the crowd. Feng Xiao was the first to speak. I agree with Brother Feng's proposal. I also believe that risks must not be forgotten at any time. Ignoring the risks itself is the biggest risk, Wei Yandan continued. As more and more people agreed at the scene, John saw that nothing had been accomplished this year, so he took advantage of the situation and agreed. It was already 1 o'clock at noon. Lu Feng looked at the time and said, since everyone has no opinions on these two items, this board meeting will come to an end. GFN has gone through these years and cannot do without it. Thanks to your hard work, this is a big ship. When it was a small fishing boat, it could not face the huge waves alone. At that time, we had to work together. But as the ship gets bigger, facing the huge waves is no longer as thrilling as before. The deck of this ship is bigger and the life is more comfortable. You still have to be cautious and ambitious to fight against the huge waves when you were on the small boat. There were too many huge and successful companies in this world, and every company knew that they were how to succeed, but few people can tell how to fail, so that's all. The meeting ended successfully. Amidst a burst of applause, everyone stood up. Lu Feng stood up and walked outside. This year's board meeting has ended, but everyone can feel that the seeds of internal tearing have been planted. The lunch lasted until after 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Everyone was a little happy after drinking. After the lunch, everyone went back to their rooms to rest. Zhu Lidong and other senior executives had to go back to the company for a meeting to inform them of the dividends situation. Zhu Lidong stood at the elevator entrance waiting for the elevator. Gudley came over and seemed to be going downstairs. Why don't you go back to your room to rest? I see you're drinking too much. Zhu Lidong looked back at him and said. I can still drink. Are you going back to the company? Gudley asked. Go back and have a meeting. The elevator door opened and the two of them entered the elevator. Gudley stood aside and watched the elevator descending level by level. He said, I have just come to the company. If there is anything I don't understand in the future, I hope Mr. Zhu can give me more advice. After all, I am a foreigner. Don't worry, don't be polite if you need anything, Zhu Lidong said politely. I'm just curious. The internal division of labor seems to be quite chaotic. The marketing department controls channel resources, marketing department, and brand department. How come such an important business as mobile phones is handed over to Mr. Du? Gudley didn't seem to understand. Asked. The marketing department is too huge. Such an important growth in the mobile phone business must be done intensively, and our marketing department will also cooperate, Zhu Lidong explained. I think it may be a kind of business structure adjustment. I have been in large companies for many years, and I have seen this kind of thing a lot, which is to marginalize core people through business adjustments. You still have to be more careful. Good. Li pointed out as if he had been there before. Why didn't Zhu Lidong understand? He laughed twice and said, I understand. What are you doing here? Breathe the fresh air. Let me tell you, don't take some things seriously. Next year, the mobile phone business will become the core business, and resources will gradually be tilted towards Mr. Du. Gudley reminded him. It seems that Lu Feng wants to suppress Zhu Lidong and establish a marketing department to balance the strengths of both parties. If one of these two people is disobedient, the other will immediately fight back. This is the way of balance for corporate bosses. After getting out of the elevator, Zhu Lidong looked at Gudley and said, Okay, you can breathe some fresh air. My driver is waiting. Let's talk when we have time. Gudley watched Zhu Lidong go away and was quite puzzled. Lu Feng gave up such a big piece of fat in the mobile phone business to do Guoying at the meeting. Didn't he feel uncomfortable at all? Gudli didn't believe it. Uncomfortable for sure. When Zhu Lidong heard that Du Guoying was asked to make a mobile phone, he was stunned and felt very disappointed. If it were an ordinary person, Gudli's words would definitely reach the other person's heart, but Zhu Lidong has been with Lu Feng for so many years. He knew that Lu Feng would not do this, and he must be doing it based on the core principles. After getting in the car, Zhu Lidong, smelling of alcohol, said to the driver, "Drive, go back to the company." The driver had been driving for him for 2 years. He was a thoughtful man. He glanced at the rearview mirror and felt that Mr. Zhu was not very happy. He said, "Mr. Zhu, the meeting is over. You came here these days, it's really hard to run." "Who doesn't work hard?" Zhu Lidong sighed. "We're all fine. It's just driving a car. It's too hard for you. Sometimes I see you worried and it makes me feel sad," the driver said empathetically about Zhu Lidong's difficulty. He can be said to have gone above and beyond for the sake of the company. A mountain of swords and a sea of fire. Everyone is tired and working hard, but the mobile phone business was still taken away by Du Guoying. Zhu Lidong seemed to be mumbling to himself. It was obvious that he still looked down upon Du Guoying, a latecomer. That guy from the communications company, Du Guoying, is not good. I've seen him several times. Last time I bought a car and asked security to stop the car. That guy was so arrogant and domineering, he looked like a nouveau riche," the driver said with the same hatred. "This when I returned to Mr. Liu, he was still blind. I want to see that this mobile phone business is bad." "Why do you talk so much while driving?" Zhu Lidong scolded him, then he leaned back in his seat, closed his eyes, and stopped talking. At around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, when Wei Yandan was leaving, Lu Feng gave her something. The recent financial expenditure of 3 million was transferred to an account in another province. At 6 o'clock in the evening, Lu Feng sat down with Su Yurong in the coffee shop and ordered a cup of coffee. Looking at the person opposite, Lu Feng said, "Are you going back to your hometown for the new year, or are you going back to Xiangjiang?" "Go back to Xiangjiang. I'm always on tenterhooks here." Su Yurong looked at Lu Feng and said, "You know what I'm afraid of? I was just thinking about it last night. I didn't talk to you at the board meeting. You called me tonight. In the past, I would have been in jail." "Ha ha ha, no, I'm not that narrow-minded," Lu Feng said with a smile. In fact, what Lu Feng was thinking was that if she tried any more tricks today, Su Yurong would never be able to go back. "I know you quite well. I'll come back the day after tomorrow. What did you want to ask me when you called me out?" "Where did the lithography machine go?" Su Yurong smiled and said, "I'm not sure either. The news I got is, loading has started, the Chinese New Year period should be coming soon. It won't take a few days for your family's money to arrive. I hope everything goes well." Lu Feng drank coffee and chatted about Sun Hongkai. Half an hour later, Lu Feng glanced at the time and said, "I have something else to do." "You have to eat something first." "What are you doing?" Su Yurong asked dully. "I'll sit with Feng Xiao for a while. After all, it's been such a long time, and I have to entertain guests." "It's the way to entertain guests. Then settle my matter first, and then you go and entertain me first." As Su Yurong spoke, he stood up and took his bag, making a show of leaving. "Didn't I entertain you? I'll have dinner with you tomorrow. Let's entertain somewhere else." The two of them pushed each other upstairs. Lu Feng didn't understand what it meant at this moment, so he asked, "Aren't you relatives here? When you come, you go in." It was almost 8:30 in the evening. Feng Xiao was waiting in the private room as agreed. The waiter had come in several times and asked if he wanted to order. Feng Xiao waved his hand and asked the assistant outside the door, "Where is Brother Feng?" "Sorry, I'll call and ask again." "There may be something to deal with," the assistant apologized. Just as the assistant was about to make a call, Lu Feng walked over quickly, holding a suit jacket in his hand, and his hair was quite messy. He arranged it roughly with his hands and entered the private room. "Brother Feng, what have you been doing?" Feng Xiao saw him panting. "It's okay, I just had an in-depth communication with the shareholders and exchanged opinions." Lu Feng sat down and looked at him and said, "It's inevitable that there will be some disputes of words. It's normal. Let's serve." What Feng Xiao talked most about with Lu Feng was his own affairs, such as how his family was doing, how the company was doing, and Sun Hongkai's board of directors was a mess, with different factions, and he had absolutely no control over it. "Xiao, you have to learn to grow. Although we are human beings and a civilized society, there is one thing. No matter what society, the law of the jungle will never change. You must quickly take control of the company. You also said that the major shareholder, Mr. Li, makes you very uncomfortable, so you have to win over the majority on the board of directors." Lu Feng looked at him and persuaded him earnestly, "You can't hesitate in doing things. When it's time to kill, you have to kill." Lu Feng chatted with him a lot, and Feng Xiao understood all these principles, but he just couldn't do anything about it. The people around him had always been kind-hearted since he was a child. He believed that this kind of kindness had no profit motivation behind it, and was purely a kindness of human nature. It was as if Lu Feng was good to him and taught him many things. These were not motivated by profit. Just because the two of them could chat, Feng Xiao was more willing to believe in the pure kindness deep in people's hearts. Just like the uncle next door, he is always so kind and gives him candy every now and then. This kindness has nothing to do with his parents occasionally helping him with work and doing things that the elderly cannot do. After listening to Jun's words, Lu Feng already felt that he was dead. Looking at the big boy opposite him, this man facing Li Shouji was no different from a lamb meeting an adult tiger. "Alas!" Lu Feng sighed. "Brother Feng, why are you sighing again?" Feng Xiao asked in confusion. "I feel incompetent. As a person like me, I may not lose to evil in the end, but to good. I have read a book before, which said that sometimes good is 10,000 times more vicious than evil," Lu Feng said weakly. Latest website. Return to 1990. Author, Guanwei 11 Feng. Chapter 1124. Latest website. Feng Xiao couldn't understand what Lu Feng said, just like what his father sometimes said, he couldn't understand either. Lu Feng turned the topic to life. Most of the conversations were about interesting things. Now Feng Xiao is very busy. He meets many heads of listed companies every day. Those friends who used to drift sports cars together are no longer in contact. He said that life is boring. He goes to the company every day after waking up, holds endless meetings, meets endless people, and is lifeless day after day. Lu Feng couldn't help but laugh after hearing his sigh. He didn't know how many people envied his life, but he found it boring. Welcome to the world of adults. There is so much happiness in the world of adults. Apart from being busy, you have to learn to adapt. Life is about having fun in the midst of suffering. You are already very happy. Most people in this world are suffering. Work hard. Lu Feng glanced at the time and it was already past 10 o'clock in the evening, and said to Feng Xiao, "It's getting late, go to bed early." As the board meeting ended, the dividend plan began to be announced. 3 days later, at a meeting of the R/U0026D company, Liukin announced this year's budget and dividends. Everyone was disappointed when they learned about this number. They also announced at the meeting Yang Fukin was promoted and transferred to the headquarters. After hearing this, Yang Fukin exploded on the spot. He ignored everything and directly asked who ordered Liukin. Liukin also felt more and more that Mr. Yang was lawless. He just told him to go to work according to the regulations and not to ask any questions. Yang Fukin slammed the table on the spot and shouted that this was revenge. The company now should be everyone's company, Not one person's company. He will speak to the board of directors. After Yang Fukin finished speaking, he left on the spot. No one at the scene dared to speak. His look of not being prepared to do anything really scared everyone. After the meeting, Lyukin directly contacted the personnel department of the R/U0026D company, cancelled his office, and asked people from the headquarters to take over. Yang Fukin naturally went to find Gudley, who assured him that he was fine on the spot. In less than 2 days, Yang Fukin's position was transferred to group administration, responsible for the group's internal management, that is, the maintenance of tables, chairs, benches, and printers. Yang Fukin called him several times. Wei Yandan believed that the company was making things difficult for him and that he should return to the R/U0026D company. Gudley also approached Wei Yandan several times, thinking that this was a waste of talent, and Mr. Yang had not made any mistakes. He couldn't just say that he was tormenting others just because he spoke loudly, right? Wei Yandan was so annoyed that Gudley was constantly reporting it to the board of directors. In less than 3 days after the board meeting, the board members had communicated on the phone 4 or 5 times, which was more than the entire previous year. Need more? Wei Yandan could only go to other departments and directly arranged for Yang Fukin to go to the marketing department through the headquarters personnel. Unexpectedly, Yang Fukin still made a fuss. Zhu Lidong had just finished a meeting and entered the office. He had been under a lot of pressure these days. The people below him were dissatisfied with the year-end dividend and the mobile phone business was taken away by Du Guoying. The people below also criticized him. There was a knock on the office door, and Zhu Lidong said without raising his head, "Come in." Yang Fukin opened the door and walked in. He said to Zhu Lidong in a dissatisfied tone, "Mr. Zhu, the Human Resources Department transferred me to the Marketing Department. I came and arranged to do market research, but I don't know anything about this matter. I still pay for it every month. Arrangements are made for performance. If the performance cannot be achieved, will the next step be to fire me?" Zhu Lidong raised his head and looked at him, lit a cigarette and said, "If you don't know how, just learn. Everything is a learning process. You can't just stop doing it just because you don't know how, right? I request to be transferred back to the R/U0026D company, otherwise I will continue to respond to the board of directors." "I believe the board of directors can give a fair result," Yang Fukin said solemnly. "React to the board of directors? Just react. Why are you yelling at me? Let me tell you, in my place, no matter who you are, if you can't complete the performance, you can't get a bonus. If you can't complete the performance in 3 months, get out." Zhu Lidong yelled at him, "Get out." Yang Fukin turned around and left with a gloomy face and called Gudley. An hour later, Gudley led Yang Fukin and knocked on the door of Zhu Lidong's office. "Come in." Gudley walked in, looked at Zhu Lidong and said, "Mr. Zhu, you are busy. Mr. Yang is really not suitable for this matter. He is an engineer, and doing market research is a bit overqualified. As for me, this is the only thing I have done recently. I told the board of directors, and John said that we still need to do a good job of matching talents with positions, so that the company can develop better." Zhu Lidong looked at the two of them. This was a sign of reinforcements. He snorted and said, "John? Doesn't the board of directors not intervene in management? It seems that your position can't control me, right?" Gudley thought that Zhu Lidong did not understand the current situation, so he said, "The board of directors does not interfere in management, but next year's board meeting will still discuss whether the management will stay or leave. Of course I can't control you. This is just I am coming to you as a personal friend, and I hope you will consider it. That's it. I've already given you a lot of face. Believe it or not, I sent him to Africa to do business. By then, he will only be able to watch chimpanzees baring their teeth. Don't use the board of directors to pressure me. Zhu Lidong took a sharp breath. Yan looked at Gudley and said, you have found such a big backer, right? That's what others dare not do. I will do it, and I will take care of the things that offend people. Now I am officially informing you that you have been fired. Is it enough to give you face? Zhu Lidong asked, staring at Gudley. Yang Fukin panicked for a moment and pushed Gudley's back quietly with his hand. Gudley couldn't do anything at this moment. He really didn't expect that these executives would not accept the soft words. Since Mr. Zhu is so disrespectful, let's wait until next year's board meeting to see you. Gudley stood up and snorted coldly and went out. Yang Fukin was left dumbfounded on the spot, turned around and chased out, asking, what should I do next? There is no job anymore, where will I go to work? Don't worry, I'll make arrangements for you. As an engineer, are you still worried about not having a job? Gudley patted him on the shoulder and said, there are many job opportunities overseas and the pay is better. Yang Fukin felt better and began to imagine that he would go abroad to earn US dollars, work 5 or 6 hours a day, live in a villa, and have a small barbecue every now and then. Little did he know that he had to wait for several months without hearing anything from him. Lu Feng has been very busy these days. Su Yorong and Feng Xiao have both gone back. As the end of the year is approaching, Zhang Ruhing should also get busy. In the past few days, he has had several phone calls with people from the Science and Technology Committee, and at the same time he has given instructions. Wei Yandan, Liukin did a good job of reception and started working as soon as people arrived after the new year. Don't worry, everything has been arranged here. You can celebrate the Chinese New Year in your hometown. The branch has been registered. You can start working as soon as you bring your people, Lu Feng said to the phone. The two parties were polite for a long time before hanging up the phone. Lu Feng's cell phone rang again and he picked up. Who is this? Mr. Lu, it's me, Zhu Lidong. I just fired that Yang Fukin, Zhu Lidong said. Let's open it. This Gudley is here. These people in the board of directors have to hold conference calls every now and then. If we lay a nail this year, we will see how big the crack will be next year. We just have to do our best. Lu Feng leaned on the sofa and said, you don't need to worry about the various arrangements during the Chinese New Year this year. I have to go back early. Lu Feng now has nothing else to do except his mobile phone business. If he has something to do, he has to go to Jiangsu. Since the mobile phone business was settled, Zhu Lidong has met with Guangzhou province several times. The province is relatively supportive of Jia Feng's mobile phone business, but the province does not want to interfere too much in this kind of business, which involves state-owned enterprises. Zhu Lidong went to the Posts and Telecommunications Group one after another. The two parties had a difficult time talking, but they had a good conversation with China Unicom, which had just been established a few years ago. Unfortunately, the current signal of China Unicom is too poor, and the two parties only reached a basic agreement. What happens next? Not quite sure yet. When the mobile phone is launched next year, if this problem cannot be solved, it will be fatal for Jia Feng. Lu Feng's vision for mobile phones is to sell bundled products that will become popular in many years. Lu Feng talked about this matter on the phone with the leaders of the Science and Technology Commission today, hoping to promote this matter in the Guangzhou area through pressure from above. On the phone, Lu Feng asked Zhu Lidong to talk again. They could conduct a three-party negotiation. He would involve the province, the post office and the telecommunications parties to sit down and talk. The three parties could pay for the signal tower, and Jia Feng could also pay several million. After hanging up the phone, Lu Feng breathed a long sigh of relief and felt helpless. The current construction of signal base stations was too weak, even in these wealthy provinces. The clock on the wall had already pointed to 6:30 in the afternoon. Duo walked into the house with a schoolbag in his hand, threw the schoolbag on the sofa and asked, Dad, when are we going back to our hometown? Waiting for your winter vacation, Lu Feng said casually. Duo said oh and went upstairs. Lu Feng stood up and looked at the calendar. He knew Huan Yowei, and he couldn't convince him about this matter for a month. In addition, with his current status, he would definitely have an impact on the province, so it would be better to go a few days early. Before leaving, Lu Feng had to go and see Du Guoying's plan for the mobile phone business. This person was very good at marketing, but he also needed to be more attentive. If things went wrong, it would be no joke. I'll go out for a while. You can wait for your mother at home, Lu Feng shouted upstairs. Know it? Lu Feng picked up the car keys on the coffee table, went out, and drove straight to the company. Latest website. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Return to 1990. Author, Guanwei 11 Feng. Chapter 1125. Latest website. There are not many people in the communications company. The entire company totals more than 300 people. They are only responsible for the pager product, which includes marketing, advertising, sales channels, etc. They also have to interface with the marketing department. All they do is product design, advertising design, market pricing, brand marketing and several aspects. It can be said that the communication company is a subsidiary that relies on the marketing department. Now the mobile phone business is mainly dominated by the communication company, and the marketing department has become a facilitator. How can they be unhappy? When Du Guoying was having an internal meeting, he couldn't help but smile, and the entire atmosphere within the communications company reached its peak. In the evening, Lu Feng parked his car downstairs and went upstairs. No one in the entire company was off work. He looked like he was in full swing. He knocked on the door of Du Guoying's office. Seeing that he was still busy, Lu Feng said, "How are you doing?" "Mr. Lu, why are you here?" Du Guoying stood up hurriedly and said, "We have been working overtime these days. If you don't come to me, I still want to find you." "I have good news." Lu Feng sat on the sofa and asked, "What's the news?" "It's about mobile phone promotion. I recently contacted the advertising department of the Spring Festival Gala through the person in charge of the film and television media company. This year's Spring Festival Gala still lacks a sponsor. It is expensive, but it will definitely have a great influence across the country." Du Guoying sat down and said, "I discussed it with Mr. Zhu, and he thought that the product has not yet been launched, and it is not appropriate to invest so much in advertising." "Spring Festival Gala? Is it the advertisement for the 12 o'clock time? Wasn't that advertisement sold half a year ago?" Lu Feng wondered. "It's not telling the time on time, it's sponsorship, or it's the host mentioning a few words when announcing the curtain. They stipulate that it should not exceed 15 words, one word is 1 million, and it should be mentioned once every 2 programs. I think it can greatly enhance the brand power. Next year's products, when it goes online, it can be said that the Spring Festival Gala has designated supplies," Du Guoying said. Lu Feng nodded slightly and asked, "I came here today just to see what kind of people you plan to position your mobile phone for and the direction of advertising and marketing." After hearing this, Du Guoying stood up, picked up the landline and made a call, "Ask all department heads to come to my office." 10 minutes later, there were 13 or 14 people crowded into the office. Everyone looked at Lu Feng. They all looked quite restrained. It was obvious that the boss had come to inspect the work. "Don't be nervous, just find a place to sit," Lu Feng said to them. Du Guoying said to one of the men in his 40s, "Old Joe, please introduce to Mr. Lu the positioning of the mobile phone brand." "Hello, Mr. Lu, we have collected a lot of market information in the past 6 months. From last year to now, the mobile phone market has expanded rapidly in China, dominated by Motorola and Nokia. Products such as mobile phones are rapidly exiting the market. Among them, Motorola's market it has the largest share, with a monthly sales volume of 10,000 units and a unit price of about 8,000 units. Nokia also sells 7,000 units in a single month. In the overall market, monthly shipments are about 25,000 units. Based on the comprehensive judgment of the market, we believe that 1996 will be the explosive year of mobile phones, and the overall sales volume will reach more than 50,000 units, or even more. The current mobile phone market is still dominated by business. Taking Nokia as an example, there the profit is about 40%, and Motorola is about the same. Compared with these two companies, we don't have much profit margin, so we plan to position our products as high-end products, mainly high-end business products. The price can't be too high, Lu Feng asked Du Guoying. You have done so much market research, you must understand one truth, that is, if you follow other people's theories, you will never surpass them. Du Guoying nodded in understanding, and someone else took out a notebook and took notes in his hand. Everyone now knows that mobile phones are used for business. In this field, you can never surpass the two giants Motorola and Nokia. A few days ago, Zhu Lidong was talking to people from the province and the Post and Telecommunications Group. I told him at that time he came up with the idea of opening a free line to make calls. What does that mean? It doesn't mean that calls are free, but that one mobile phone number can be bundled with several mobile phone numbers, and calls between these mobile phone numbers are free. Lu Feng said to everyone, have you opened your mind? Free is always the most attractive and the most expensive. Boss needs business negotiations and communication, but their life is not just work, but also life. Think about it, if you want free calls, can't you just buy one? Lu Feng guided the crowd. Du Guoying was the first to react, patted his thigh with his hand and said, second wife. Everyone present was stunned, and Lu Feng did not react. Who among the current big bosses doesn't have a second wife? Business is work, and a second wife is life. Mr. Lu, you are so awesome, Du Guoying said with shining eyes. This is definitely a selling point. Lu Feng looked at him slightly embarrassed and said, I'm thinking about my wife. Some people at the scene couldn't hold back their laughter. Du Guoying smiled awkwardly and said, no one spends money on their wives nowadays. A mobile phone costs 7,000 or 8,000, and it must be given to the second wife. This consumer relationship is so good, and the consumption of both sexes will always be the same, the best track, but only if the condition of free phone calls can be met. Lu Feng didn't have much to say about this market positioning. After all, it is indeed impossible for ordinary people to spend a year's salary to buy a mobile phone. The biggest consumption power lies with the boss. When setting prices, we must target the largest group in the market. For big bosses who don't have many people, we must target the group with an annual income of 30,000 to 50,000, that is, the middle class. For them, it takes more than 2 months to it is still possible to buy a mobile phone with your salary. Lu Feng said to the crowd, it is very important to give the product a sense of petty bourgeoisie superiority. What is the terminal market price? Du Guoying asked. What's the approximate cost? This depends on sales volume. If we can sell 50,000 mobile phones per year, the cost will be 6,000 yuan. The main reason is that the 2G signal motherboard costs more than 1,000 yuan. Other buttons, screens, batteries, and chargers, a series of domestic prices are not cheap, and the cost can be reduced after scale. However, the biggest cost is the cooperation with the Posts and Telecommunications Group. Du Guoying thought for a while and said, it depends on how Mr. Zhu negotiates with them. First set a price of 6,800, and I will negotiate with the Postal and Telecommunications Group, Lu Feng said solemnly. A group of people talked from product positioning to cost accounting until past 9 o'clock in the evening. If 100,000 mobile phones can be sold every year, the cost of the mobile phone will be less than 3,000 yuan. but if it cannot be sold, the cost will go up. At the same time, it has a very close relationship with the Post and Telecommunications Group. The Guangzhou Post and Telecommunications Group proposed that GFN should bear part of the cost of the newly added signal towers and various lines. In addition, if it offers free calls, the other party will definitely be angry. These are all hidden costs. At around 10 o'clock in the evening, Lu Feng drove home. Before leaving, he told Du Guoying that the advertisement for the Spring Festival Gala could be published, and the price was set at 6,800. He did not expect the mobile phone to make money. As long as it could be sold, all the following accessories can bring back a lot of profits. He mainly focuses on quantity. As long as he can measure up, he has plenty of ways to make money. Zhang Xiaoyan had already gone home. She was sitting on the sofa watching TV and yawning. She glanced at Lu Feng and said, "Haven't the board meeting been over? What are you doing again?" "I just have endless meetings, what can I do, steal people?" Lu Feng slumped on the sofa and asked, "Aren't you still asleep?" "I just want to see what kind of person someone can steal back." Zhang Xiaoyan turned off the TV, stood up and walked upstairs, saying, "When you go back to your hometown, take Duo with you and let me be alone here. Have a quiet New Year." "I can't take her with me, so I have to go to Jiangsu first." "Are you really not going back for the Chinese New Year?" Lu Feng stood up and followed her, asking, "It's been 2 years since I went back." "No, I know what it's like to go back. If you don't want to take her with you, just stay with me." As Zhang Xiaoyan spoke, she went into the house and lay down. Lu Feng took off his clothes, got on the bed and sighed, "Okay. The mobile phone business is the goal of the entire group, and cooperation between the marketing department and the communications company must be strengthened." Lu Feng also knew that Du Guoying came relatively late and his position in the group was not high enough, so he pulled Zhu Lidong, Liuqin, and Du Guoying. Came here and held meetings for several days in a row. "In this battle of mobile phones, we can only win, not lose. No matter what happens inside the board of directors, the domestic mobile phone market must prosper." Lu Feng repeatedly emphasized at the meeting that even if GFN is torn apart next year and he ends up being eliminated, domestic mobile phones must also rise. They need to cultivate the status of domestic mobile phones in the hearts of consumers. Even if they collapse, they will start a business again and the environment will be much better. Let them not think too much and never think that if they do well today, they may be kicked out tomorrow. At the meeting, Lu Feng also specifically emphasized the issue of middle and high-level management, especially the frequent contact with Gudley. For those who spread some messy remarks within the group, they should be fired when they should be fired. In special times, the methods cannot be soft. On December 28, the weather had completely turned cold, and it was snowing heavily in the north. Almost all the things that should be done in the company were done. Lu Feng held meetings in the company for more than 10 days in a row, and Gudley gave several instructions to the directors. The bureau reacted and he interfered with management. No matter whether he cursed openly or secretly, it could not change the situation. Lu Feng felt that it was time for him to set off, but before he set off, he had to make a harassing phone call. Latest website. Return to 1990. Author, Guanwei 11 Feng. Chapter 1126. Latest website. Lu Feng searched at home for a long time but couldn't find the phone number of Huang Youwei's office, so he had to call the person in charge of the Suzhou factory and ask him to find Huang Youwei's phone number. A meeting has just ended in Huang Youwei's office. Today's task has been completed. It has been almost 2 years since he was transferred. Huang Youwei has lived up to expectations and has made very good achievements in the economy. The province still recognizes his ability very much, which has put a lot of smiles on Huang Youwei's old face during this period. If he works for a few more years, he is likely to be the youngest provincial leader in the province, and it can be said that his career will be smooth. The phone on the table rang. Huang Yowei picked it up and said, "I'm Huang Yowei, who am I?" "Hi Secretary Huang, it's me, Xiao Lu," Lu Feng said with a playful smile on the phone. "Xiao Lu? Which Xiao Lu?" Huang Yowei thought quickly in his head and couldn't remember anyone named Lu. "You are such a noble person who forgets things." "It's me, Lu Feng, the Lu Feng of GFN Group." Lu Feng knew that Huang Yowei has been going smoothly in the past 2 years. He is now a big boss, so it is normal for him not to remember himself. When he heard that it was Lu Feng, the smile on Huang Yowei's face softened a lot. He said "oh" several times and asked warily, "Is something wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. It's almost the Chinese New Year. I want to see you and bring you some souvenirs. We are old friends and we are old friends. Since we are old friends, let's move around more." Lu Feng was afraid that the other party would reject him, so he continued, "I went to the capital this year to hold several meetings. The Science and Technology Commission, the Business Administration, the State-Owned Assets Supervision and Administration Commission, and some leaders of the State-Owned Assets Supervision and Administration Commission all said that we need to increase economic development and come up with ideas. Use your brain and take steps." Huang Yowei originally wanted to hang up the phone directly, but after hearing what he said, it seemed like we could have a conversation. Who doesn't need some resources in life? What's more, Huang Yowei also knows that the GFN Group now is not the GFN Group of the past. When Schroeder's group invested, he had already seen that GFN was going to lose control, but he was too lazy to remind it. Mr. Lu has been very busy in the past 2 years, attending meetings everywhere. After all, Jiangsu is also where you made your fortune. You should mention it more in some important meetings in the future, Huang Yowei said with a smile. That's natural. I may be passing by you recently. If you have time, come and sit with me. I happen to have a very good project here that we can talk about, Lu Feng said into the phone. A very good project? Huang Yowei was a little suspicious and asked, "This is a very good project, for whom is it for?" "Of course it's for both of us. Don't worry, what happened this time is absolutely reliable. We want to help Jiangsu build an information high-speed network. For big cities, tap water, electricity, and roads are already basic conditions. But in terms of communications, it is still unable to become a large province. Not to mention international metropolises like Xiangjiang, Shanghai cannot compare. Communications have become one of the rigid standards for developed cities." Lu Feng boasted about the importance of communication on the phone. As long as communication is smooth, economic development will be on the high road and communication between people will be more convenient. From a small point of view, it will make life easier. From a big point of view, in the country, in business competition, advantages will be more prominent and it will be easier to attract companies. If Lu Feng had told him this in the past, Huang Yowei would have felt that this person was cheating again. He must have acquired the land first, then mortgaged it, and then asked the local government to provide money to help him build a factory. Then he started recruiting workers for research and development. But now it is different. GFN already has very strong capital and a very large accumulation in the field of communications. To put it bluntly, back then it was a poor boy who bared his big white teeth to talk about his dreams, but now it is a rich and handsome man who leads a group of engineers to invest in construction, which is naturally different. You can come and chat. We haven't seen each other for a long time. To be honest, I miss you very much. Come and meet and chat, Huang Yowei invited warmly. Lu Feng didn't feel much about Huang Yowei's change of attitude. He just said, "Okay, I'll contact you in advance if I go." The two of them were polite and hung up the phone. Compared to the closeness they had many years ago, the two of them were more like businessmen at this moment. No matter how they had always been close to each other in the past, from that small place all the way to now, we are no longer the same people as before. Own. No matter how good friends are, they will become strangers after they have experienced enough growth. Perhaps both of them have achieved their own achievements and achieved sufficient social status, and it is no longer possible for them to tease each other as casually as they did in that small place. It's not like one just took office and the other was anxious to open a factory. Some friendships will be buried forever in the years and can never go back. Lu Feng didn't have time to lament these things. Having lived in 2 lifetimes, he had long understood the true meaning of life. Loneliness is an adult's most caring friend. It took 2 days to settle the company's affairs, and ask Zhu Lidong to negotiate the free call task with Guangzhou. If the province really couldn't negotiate, then let's talk about Shenzhen. This would be Jiafeng's biggest market weapon. It was almost January. Lu Feng looked at Zhang Xiaoyan on the sofa and asked, "Are you sure you don't want to go back?" "Forget it, let me spend the new year with peace of mind." "I don't want too many things to happen." Zhang Xiaoyan flipped through the newspaper and said, "Why doesn't my free phone of yours feel unreliable? Whether I am reliable or not is just a last resort. Maybe I will be kicked out of the board of directors next year and I will have to rely on you to support me," Lu Feng said, lighting a cigarette. "It's good. After all these years of hard work, it's all in vain. It's just me who supports you. It's not like I haven't supported you before," Zhang Xiaoyan said with a hint of secret joy. Lu Feng turned his head and glanced at her. He couldn't figure out one thing: why all women wanted him to go bankrupt and support themselves, Zhang Xiaoyan like this, and Su Yurong even more so. Perhaps there is nothing more tempting for a woman than to control a powerful man. Is this the nature? It's just like a man's nature to pull good women into trouble and persuade prostitutes to be good. Lu Feng sighed in his heart for a while, then silently went upstairs to rest. A week later, he arranged for a private jet to be prepared. At the same time, he informed Huang Youwei that he would arrive today, and then rushed to the airport. After arriving at the airport, he didn't stop for a second and boarded the plane directly to take off. Sitting in the luxurious private jet, Lu Feng also sighed that it was great to have money. As the plane landed at Nanjing Airport, there was already a team of welcoming people waiting on site. As Lu Feng stepped off the plane, a delicate-looking woman came over and said, "Mr. Lu, thank you for your hard work along the way. I'm sorry to hear from Secretary Huang entrusted to welcome you. I am the Deputy Mayor of Nanjing, my surname is Wang." "Hello, hello," Lu Feng stretched out his hands and held them together. "I'm flattered that you came to the airport to greet me." In addition to Vice Mayor Wang, there was also an office director, and the others were members of the atmosphere team. After taking a few photos at the scene, they got in the car and headed straight to the collapsed hotel. In the car, Lu Feng looked at the beautiful and generous deputy mayor and asked, "How are the sales of mobile phones here now? In the past, there were more mobile phones. Now, most of them are Motorola. I feel that more and more people are using mobile phones in the past 2 years." Vice Mayor Wang pondered for a moment and asked, "I can just ask, let's take a moment, are we here to build a factory or do research and development?" "Ah." Lu Feng was stunned for a moment when he heard this, and hurriedly said, "Didn't Secretary Huang tell you? I'm not here to build a factory. We have a factory in Suzhou. This time, we still hope to reach cooperation with the province and speed up the development of the province, accelerate the construction of mobile communications." Vice Mayor Wang's interest dropped a lot when he heard this. He nodded and said, "I thought Mr. Lu came to open a factory. As for communication cooperation, how do you plan to cooperate?" "It's like this. We will launch a mobile phone next year. We hope to cooperate with the province. The local post and telecommunications group will add signal towers to improve signal coverage. We can bind the product to the local post and telecommunications group for sales," Lu Feng explained. "Road. That is, if you want to sell goods, let us lay the infrastructure, right?" Vice Mayor Wang's interest is even lower. She even regrets coming to pick up Lu Feng now. She would have known that she would just send away a deputy director of the office. Just come. You can't say that. We can pay certain costs, such as the cost of signal towers, and we can bear part of it, Lu Feng explained. When Deputy Mayor Wang heard about this kind of transaction, he obviously didn't want to improve the business under his jurisdiction much, let alone attract investment, and he didn't want to say anything. Lu Feng saw her sitting there without saying a word, and he also shut up. After all, this matter was meaningless from the perspective of a deputy mayor, but from the perspective of the economic development of the province, it was different. As the car was speeding, Vice Mayor Wang suddenly said, "Do you have any intention of relocating the factory in Suzhou? The cost of relocation is too high. The industrial supporting facilities there are still very mature, and if you move within the province, it is easy to cause gossip," Lu Feng said euphemistically. If he moved here from Suzhou, he would not be criticized by the mayor of Suzhou. Cursed to death. When the car arrived at the hotel, Vice Mayor Wang exchanged a few pleasantries and said that he had something to do and left in advance. Lu Feng was not surprised and went upstairs after she left. At the same time, a meeting was going on in the provincial conference room. At the head of the meeting sat a man in his 60s with a Chinese character face and a rather majestic look. Huang Yowei sat in the row on the left, opposite the post office. A platoon leader of the group. Comrade Yowei has just made it very clear about developing communications within the province and promoting economic development. So what are your opinions on the post and telecommunications sector? I don't agree, a man in his 50s was the first to speak. This is a typical infringement of state-owned assets. For a private enterprise, let us build more infrastructure. We have invested the cost and the profit, but it was profited away by private enterprises. Latest website. Return to 1990. Author, Guanwei 11 Feng. Chapter 1127. Latest website. The leader had already said this, and the men next to him naturally did not dare to say anything more. The one who spoke was Mr. Zhou, the chairman of the local post and telecommunications group, and next to him were the business leaders of China Unicom and China Telecom. The attitudes of several people around Huang Yowei are also quite ambiguous. For state-owned enterprises, this is indeed a not very cost-effective deal. Just because a company wants to sell mobile phones, they have to pay to build signal towers. Huang Yowei looked at the man sitting in the first place and said, "Secretary Li, I think from the perspective of the province, this investment is insignificant. Smooth communication will bring great business prosperity, and people's communication costs will be lower. Behind the economy, there is not only access to roads, electricity, and water, but also phone calls. Faster communication will bring about a huge consumer market. It's not just about buying a mobile phone. To give you a simple example, one day I suddenly wanted to treat Mr. Zhou to a meal. I didn't tell him in advance. I just gave him a call and the meal was spent." Another example is business negotiations, where communication can be maintained anytime and anywhere, making it easier to promote cooperation. "Oh, Secretary Huang," the chairman of the Post and Telecommunications team opposite said, "aren't you being sophistical? There are no mobile phones, but now there are pagers, and phone booths are also being vigorously developed. We have our tasks, and we can't say that Zhang-san is here. Pave the way for Zhang-san, Li Si is here, build a bridge for Li Si, right?" A man in his 50s next to Huang Yowei asked, "Secretary Huang, I remember that Mr. Lu of Jiafeng Group has a close relationship with you, right? In Suzhou back then, everyone knew that you were his backer." "No, no, no," Huang Yowei waved his hands repeatedly and said, "Secretaries Haida can't say this nonsense. When I was in Suzhou, I supported local famous enterprises, and my relationship with Mr. Lu was only work-related. What about me? Looking at this matter completely from a development perspective." The scene looked quite anxious. Huang Yawei was under siege, but Secretary Li, who made the final decision, said nothing. The Posts and Telecommunications Group had their own considerations. Now they had their own internal bases. China Unicom was separated, but its footing was unstable. Posts and Telecommunications, the group has been losing money for consecutive years. They know that it will be a matter of time before telecom is separated. Now they only focus on their postal and savings businesses. As for telecom, which is about to leave, they are not willing to spend too much energy. Huang Yawei's meteoric rise has also been criticized in the province. This person seems to have no other interests except economics. This kind of meeting is not a good place for him. Communication is very important. The transmission of information means communication. Although the country has not included this aspect in the overall strategic plan, there are development requirements for landlines and phone booths. We cannot be like bugs. Same, poke it and move it. Secretary Li looked around the scene and said, we still need to have the motivation to actively explore. This matter is not decided today. Everyone should think about it for themselves when they go back and make practical decisions for their own development, instead of doing some nonsense. The meeting ended like this. Mr. Zhou chatted with Huang Yawei for a few words. The general meaning was not to cause trouble for them. Now building landline phone lines is their most important task. Mobile phones are not suitable for the current domestic situation. Mr. Zhou left, but the chairman of China Unicom came over to exchange greetings. He said implicitly that they were willing to do this as long as the investment was not that high. However, China Unicom had only been separated for a few years and was too weak. The boss in charge of the telecommunications business also came over to chat for a few words. The three companies now have different intentions and are afraid of being married to others. They used to be one family. Not to mention that China Unicom has become independent. China Telecom will soon face a separation. Live your own life. Lu Feng took a brief rest in the hotel. No one paid attention to him, and he felt quite annoyed. As soon as these people heard that he couldn't take advantage, they immediately hid further away than anyone else. At around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, Lu Feng called Huang Yawei's office. After the call was connected, Lu Feng briefly explained his current situation. Today I have a meeting in the province. Deputy Mayor Wang is not responsible for this. He is just picking you up for me temporarily. How about this? You go to the agency cafeteria in the evening and we have a meal and chat, Huang Yawei said into the phone. Good. Lu Feng intuitively told him that this matter might not be easy to handle. It would be difficult to negotiate over there in Guangzhou, but it would also be difficult here. After hanging up the phone, Lu Feng went downstairs and went straight to the municipal office. Lu Feng entered Huang Yawei's office under the leadership of the office director. Lu Feng looked at Huang Yawei in front of him. He was obviously much older. His hair was also parted. His hair was obviously whiter. Compared with the previous high-spirited, he was now a bit more energetic. Minky, it can be seen that he is very hard-working. Mr. Huang, long time no see. Lu Feng stepped forward and sighed. Huang Yawei glanced at Lu Feng and said more formally, Mr. Lu, please sit down. Xiao Zhao, please give me a cup of tea. There's no need to be too polite. Lu Feng sat on the sofa and said, how's it going? This project is a real investment. It's definitely not here to get land or money. I held a meeting in the province and talked about this matter. The province did not express its position, but the Post and Telecommunications Group was very resistant. I guess it will be difficult for you to handle this matter. Huang Yawei took it from the drawer. He took out a pack of cigarettes, lit one, and handed the rest to Lu Feng, and continued, Post and telecommunications are not under the direct jurisdiction of the province. The main task now is the telephone line. Mobile phones are not easy to deal with. But now that this has happened, it will obviously drive the economy. Information is the first element of development. The reason I came here this time is to cooperate with the province. I don't mean to ask them to spend all the money. We can also contribute part of the construction money, Lu Feng said towards Huang Youwei. I think this is a win-win situation. You can't just think about yourself, you also have to consider the development of state-owned enterprises and the local situation. I was told at the meeting today that my relationship with you is unusual and that this matter is an outflow of state-owned assets. Huang Youwei smoked a cigarette. Somewhat worried. Huang Youwei is very clear about the advantages of mobile phones. In the past year, he has been to 2 foreign countries for inspections. Information in cities in developed countries is very fast. This speed will bring high efficiency, higher social efficiency, and greater productivity. In terms of improvement, to put it exaggeratedly, 1 year's speed is comparable to 2 years. The convenience of mobile phones cannot be replaced by pagers and landlines. It may not be so obvious in large companies, but in small manufacturers, the boss has a mobile phone and can contact suppliers and buyers at any time. How many times more efficient is this growth rate? But if we want to promote the work of current state-owned enterprises, the local government has no big way to do it. Let's eat first. In the private room of the government canteen, the food is the standard 4 dishes and 1 soup. Not only Huang Youwei, but also 2 deputy mayors and 2 heads of local state-owned enterprises are present. Everyone sat down and exchanged pleasantries and got to know each other. Lu Feng asked the deputy mayor in charge of municipal engineering, how many signal towers are there in our city now? How much area can they cover? We don't have much data in this area, but the quantity is certainly not large. There are several signal towers in the city center, as well as several types of commercial housing and factory areas. They are probably scattered here and there. Together, they cover the urban area. 1/5 of that. After hearing this data, Lu Feng felt a little cold. The coverage was even lower than he imagined. Mainly because it was useless even if it covered general residential areas. Not one of the 10,000 people had a mobile phone. It was better to set up more phones. The line is real. As things started to start, everyone changed glasses and the atmosphere at the dinner table became lively. They started talking about the municipal infrastructure budget. Lu Feng asked Huang Youwei, Secretary Huang, this matter is definitely good for the development of the city. For example, what do you think about the city providing money to support it and deducting it from the infrastructure budget? Before Huang Youwei could say anything, the deputy mayor in charge of municipal administration shook his head like a rattle and said, no, absolutely not. If this money is useful, it must be invested by big entrepreneurs like Mr. Lu. The signal is there. If you do, you can sell mobile phones. Mobile phones are very expensive now. You can earn at least 5,000 to 6,000 yuan by selling one mobile phone. The others nodded and looked at Lu Feng one by one, as if he were looking at a meat bun with a lot of stuffing. It's impossible for the city to provide money. Don't think about it. Huang Youwei was afraid that Lu Feng would use his brain and said seriously to him, I'm telling you this, the only thing the city can do is to cooperate. For the rest, you tell the province. Lu Feng asked again, if he invests in building signal towers, will these assets and operating rights also belong to the company? Huang Youwei repeatedly refused. As long as these things are implemented and occupy land in the city, they will be managed by the city, and the telecommunications business will belong to the company. The postal and telecommunications group is in charge, and the 2 companies negotiate. Now Huang Youwei is unwilling to say anything except opening his mouth. It is his credit that this thing was done. If it was not done, there would be no loss at all. After 3 rounds of wine and 5 delicious dishes, Huang Youwei smacked his lips and asked, let me ask you something. Is Jiafeng Group now considered a foreign investment or a joint venture? It's considered a foreign-owned holding. Who do you think dares to hand over the telecommunications business to such a company? You make mobile phones. I know what you think. It's just that you can't survive in the company. This is a life-saving straw. It's a pity that you are lucky. It's really not good. Huang Yowei sighed and lit a pipe. Is a mobile phone good? Good. It's just that the country now advocates the installation of telephone lines and popularization of landlines. The Post and Telecommunications Group is busy with this matter, but there are also good things. Let me bring you news that after today's meeting, the chairman of China Unicom had a few words with me and he was quite interested. It's not that I can't get along in the company, I'm doing very well. Lu Feng stared at Huang Yowei and said, I'm no worse than you. You listened to me, sold the company directly, and started working in other industries. You would have been up a long time ago, Huang Yowei said with a slightly dissatisfied tone on his slightly tipsy face. Latest website. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Return to 1990. Author, Guanwei 11 Feng. Chapter 1128. Latest website. Lu Feng didn't say anything. Even now, Huang Yowei still thinks that he was right. At the dinner table, Huang Yowei talked about what happened back then. If he had sold it directly to Goldman Sachs or other overseas capital, he would have immediately made motorcycles after getting the money. Now the industry in this area has already started. Not only is the home appliance market exploding, but the motorcycle and van markets are also exploding. A large amount of foreign capital has entered the country and traded technology for the market. A large amount of money has been earned by foreign capital. The country is vigorously supporting related industries. Several deputy mayors at the scene echoed, touting Huang Yowei's strategic vision. Lu Feng just smiled and said nothing, and continued chatting until about 8 o'clock in the evening. The private room was filled with mist. Lu Feng said, things are not easy to handle, but it has to be done, and I still want to fight for it. After all, no matter what, as long as it is done, it will be a good thing for all parties. If you want me to see it, forget it. If it is done successfully, there is no credit. If it is done badly, it will be nothing but trouble. The deputy mayor in charge of municipal administration next to him said, we have just started to mention this matter, and it has already happened. Many people have been gossiping, but you didn't hear it. People are talking about benefit transfer, and it's not easy for Secretary Huang to do it. Huang Yowei is indeed in a dilemma. As soon as he gets involved in this matter, he will definitely be criticized. The problem is that if this matter is done, it will really have a great effect. At this juncture, he was accused of being a platform for GFN Group and draining state-owned assets to private companies. This affected his career. There was a brief silence in the private room. Everyone looked at Huang Yowei. After a long silence, Huang Yowei took a puff of smoke and said, as long as it is correct, objective, and beneficial to the city, it should be promoted. The deputy mayor next to him whispered, the Postal and Telecommunications Group is not willing to do this, and Secretaries Haida will also find excuses. From now on, meetings in the province will be very passive. Ignore those things, put aside all the mess, and do the right thing. Huang Yowei blinked his eyes and said after a while, do what is good for the people. Tomorrow, I will call them over for a meeting. Lu Feng didn't know what kind of environment he was in now. From the low-pitched conversation of the deputy mayor just now, he felt that he was not as comfortable as he was in Suzhou. It is normal for two people in officialdom to quarrel with each other. Lu Feng looked at the white hair sprouting from his temples. He was a little less capable and a little more slippery than before. What made him feel relieved was that this man was at least a business person. Thank you, Secretary Huang, Lu Feng thanked him. Stop talking about that. You can't keep your company. Huang Yowei stood up as he spoke, put on the coat draped on the chair, and walked outside. At 10 o'clock in the evening, Lu Feng returned to the hotel, lying on the bed and tossing and turning, unable to sleep. He only thought about using his own energy to promote the leap of the times. He did not consider that landline phones are now an important strategic layout of the country. Without the investment of national infrastructure, no matter who comes, they can't succeed. In the past 2 years, Lu Feng has felt more and more insignificant. Once upon a time, he also believed that money was earned by himself and had nothing to do with anyone else. But now it seems that without the country's huge investment, let alone a small businessman, even gods can hardly make money. And where does the country's money come from? It is the taxes paid by hundreds of millions of working people, and it is also the taxes paved and built bridges bit by hundreds of millions of ordinary people. It's true that I went to the city yesterday and came back with tears in my eyes. Lu Feng sighed and turned over to sleep. The next day, things about Lu Feng had spread within the municipal government. These people were very well informed. Some people even called Suzhou overnight to investigate Lu Feng's details and see what his relationship with Huang Yowei was. This time, the mobile phone cooperation has also been rumored by some people. Many people are saying privately that Huang Yowei wants to take advantage of the opportunity to make a fortune. Some people also say that when the Post and Telecommunications Group was engaged in telephone lines and phone booths, the municipal government has not made much profit, but now it is looking for trouble for them. Various theories are circulating everywhere, and Huang Yowei has become a whirlpool of public opinion. Behind this is the situation caused by his large-scale introduction of private companies and foreign companies and suppression of state-owned enterprises in the past 2 years. Lu Feng didn't know much about these twists and turns. At 10 o'clock in the morning, he received a call asking him to go to the municipal government for a meeting. He arrived at an office of the municipal government 10 minutes later. Others had not yet arrived, and people came in one after another to greet him. This director, that directors. For those who didn't know, they thought Lu Feng was a senior official. A few minutes later, there was a burst of dissatisfaction outside. I made it very clear yesterday. This is not in line with the direction and positioning of our enterprise. We cannot say that when this relationship customer comes, I will set up a signal tower for him. That relationship when the customer comes, I will put up a wire for him, right? Mr. Zhou, this is a development issue considered from the perspective of the whole province. It is not a related party. Please show mercy, the office director persuaded from the side. Today I also want you to meet with Mr. Lu. Jiafeng, the group is the largest private enterprise in China and is very powerful. I haven't heard of it, Mr. Zhou said with a dark face and stopped talking. After a few more minutes, the conference room door was pushed open, and a slightly bloated man in his 50s or 60s, with swollen eye sockets and rough skin on his face, walked in. He was wearing a gray jacket and sat directly on the floor, opposite of the peak. Followed by a man in his 40s, wearing glasses and with a relatively flat face, he said politely to Lu Feng, "Mr. Lu, right? Hello, who are you?" Lu Feng stood up quickly and asked. "I am the chairman of China Unicom Jiangsu branch. My surname is Shen. This is my business card." Mr. Shen handed over the business card. "This is my business card." Lu Feng hurriedly handed over his business card. Mr. Zhou glanced at Mr. Shen and felt quite unhappy, but there was nothing he could do about it. They had been separated and he couldn't control it. However, Mr. Li, who was in charge of the telecommunications business, was also standing not far away. He said, "Mr. Li, what are you doing standing there?" Mr. Li coughed and walked forward and sat down. "Jiafeng Group is still very powerful. I also hurriedly asked my friends who knew about it last night. I didn't expect that private companies have such outstanding talents as Mr. Lu." Mr. Shen praised. "You are exaggerating. I am just making a small fuss. The infrastructure still depends on state-owned enterprises like you," Lu Feng said politely. "It's the same, Let's build it together, Mr. Shen said, looking particularly friendly. Lu Feng had always wanted to take the time to chat with Mr. Zhou, but he kept having a bad look. Instead, Mr. Shen smiled and talked, and his words were full of praise, as if Lu Feng was more dear to him than his son. After a while, Huang Yowei opened the door and walked in, followed by several deputy mayors in charge of municipal administration, finance, and investment promotion. Everyone, sit down. We are a provincial capital city and we must take the lead. I have called you here today just to talk about mobile phones. When I visited developed countries, I have deeply realized that mobile phones it has brought huge changes to society. Huang Yowei looked at Mr. Zhou and said, I believe Mr. Zhou also knows that now there is such an opportunity for everyone to talk openly. Once the deal is settled, I will talk to the province. Let me say something first, Mr. Zhou said, we have a task. This year, the number of landline phone installations in the province must reach 10 million households. This is the household coverage plan for urban residents. We do not have extra funds to do this. If we don't add signal base stations, then we are still happy. However, the electricity bills, equipment maintenance, and personnel salaries of the base stations are all money. The network access fee still has to be paid. I can give you a preferential price and one-time access to the network. Fee, 10 million. The person in charge of telecom sat there silently, watching eagerly, wondering if he could get any of the 10 million. Mr. Shen couldn't sit still and said hurriedly, we don't want to pay for the internet connection. We are very interested in the plan proposed by Mr. Liu. It is also one of our missions to help the development of enterprises. Mr. Shen, I would like to ask, how many mobile signal base stations do you have in the province? Lu Feng asked with great interest, but he didn't know that the next moment a basin of cold water was poured on him. Mr. Shen smiled awkwardly and said, there are still dozens of them. Can all base stations in the province be used in common? Lu Feng asked again. How is that possible? Mr. Zhou looked at Lu Feng and said angrily, how can the things we build be used by them? And let me tell you, if you are connected to their network, your mobile phone cannot make calls to their users. Do you think you can just pay 10 million for the internet connection fee? We have 2,000 base stations across the province. After a long conversation, Lu Feng fully understood the current situation. This is simply an era of warlord rule. Phones are not in the same network and cannot make calls. Local calls have one price, and calls outside the city have another price. Not to mention outside the province. In other words, if Lu Feng cooperates with China Unicom and buys Jia Feng's mobile phone, it will be equivalent to buying a brick. This is the motivation for him to ask for 10 million internet access fees. Mr. Zhou, that's what I think. I don't mean to ask the Post and Telecommunications Group to pay all the money. For example, to build a base station, we can bear 30% of the cost, the local government will pay 15%, and the province will support 100%. 15, you pay the remaining 40%, and you can also sell the network fees. Lu Feng suggested, we can sign a batch agreement, for example, build 2,000 buildings within 5 years, and build 4 buildings a year. Beizhuo, when we pay this money, the only requirement is that each mobile phone in Jiafeng can be bound to 3 or 5 numbers, and calls between these numbers are free. A signal tower, including a steel belt base station, costs about 500,000 yuan. 400 is 200 million yuan. We will pay 80 million yuan. Where can I get this 80 million yuan? Once it is built, you will not be able to sell your mobile phones. How low is the frequency of use of base stations now? If you stop doing it for a year, we will have a loss of more than 18 million. What should I say when the above asks? Mr. Zhou said to Huang Yowei, I said the market, we are asked to do it internally, or we are asked to do it in the province. Should the leader ask, who is in charge of you? Latest website. Return to 1990. Author, Guanwei 11 Feng. Chapter 1129. Latest website. Huang Yuwei frowned slightly when he heard this. It was obvious that Mr. Zhou meant this to him. After clearing his throat, Huang Yuwei said, "No matter who is in charge, the main thing is to look at the problem from a development perspective. As long as if it is beneficial and correct, we will do it. If Mr. Zhou is afraid of taking responsibility or is not clear about the world trend of communication development, I can report it to the Ministry of Information Industry at that time." Mr. Zhou didn't like to hear this. He looked at Huang Yuwei and said, "Secretary Huang, you are not under the control of the Ministry of Information Industry. Why are you talking about this? Communication is very important. I am not serving a certain leader in this position, I serve the people. It is too fast for us to develop the mobile communications industry now. If landline coverage reaches more than 70% of urban households in 2000, it will be a great victory." Obviously, Mr. Zhou doesn't like Huang Yuwei at all. Being able to come to this meeting is already a great honor for him. Mr. Zhou was trying to push Huang Yuwei out of his words. Lu Feng sat there and watched the situation. The local relationship was more complicated than he imagined. This was not a prefecture-level city. What did the leader say? The project was approved the next day. A large state-owned enterprise. The province, the city, many parties are entangled in checks and balances. Mr. Zhou, what I just mentioned about multiple companies jointly paying for the construction of signal towers, we can take a step back and contribute 50%. Lu Feng silently calculated the cost in his heart and said, "The rest, how about you guys share it?" Huang Yuwei saw that Lu Feng had given in and said, "Mr. Zhou, Mr. Lu has also given in. Let's each give in. The implementation of this matter will be a very substantial progress for the economic development of the province, and it will also be very important for your independent exploration. Okay. There are only two options, either the 10 million network access fee, or you will pay for the construction cost of the signal tower, and we will manage it after the construction is completed." Mr. Zhou said to Lu Feng, "Of course, if Mr. Lu has great powers, you can go tell the Ministry of Information Industry that as long as he sends the document to the group headquarters and then issues it down, I will definitely comply with it. I still have a meeting, so I'm sorry, I'll take the first step." After speaking, Mr. Zhou stood up and left. Huang Yuwei watched him leave with a very ugly face. The atmosphere at the scene was quite depressing. It was obvious that the city had no binding force on the Post and Telecommunications Group at all. They wanted 10 million, but Huang Yuwei couldn't even cut off a dime. Mr. Shen of China Unicom watched Mr. Zhou leave and felt quite helpless. When could he be so arrogant? Theoretically speaking, such a large state-owned enterprise has dual leadership. The vertical leadership is the Ministry of Industry and Information Industry. However, the province must also be taken into consideration, similar to Municipal Public Security Bureau. Mr. Shen saw that people at the scene were silent and said to Lu Feng, "Mr. Lu, in fact, we have also received a lot of budget this year. If Jiafeng, the province, can provide part of the money, we can build signal towers very quickly. We should build wherever we are, stand together with the people wherever we are, and faithfully provide good service." Everyone can see that Mr. Zhou doesn't care about the province at all, while Mr. Shen is just the opposite. They can't compete with the Post and Telecommunications Group in the landline phone business, so they want to go to mobile communications as long as they have money. Lu Feng looked at Mr. Shen in embarrassment and said, "Your coverage in the province is too small, and it cannot be connected to the postal and telecommunications network. This matter is too troublesome. Construction is very fast. Now BTS base stations can also be produced in China. The price is also cheap and the speed is faster. It is easy to set up 1,000 base stations within a year." Mr. Shen said to Huang Yuwei quite confidently, "Huang Secretary, don't worry, we will definitely recruit more workers and work overtime. The boss of the telecommunications business next to him groaned twice after hearing this. He was really not so humble when he was in the postal and telecommunications group. Now he is looking for work all over the world. This matter still depends on Mr. Lu. Huan Yuewei pushed the matter to Lu Feng. He knew that Lu Feng would never choose China Unicom. He could only accept what was already available, and the construction was too slow. Let's talk about this later. Lu Feng smiled at him. This meeting ended in such an anticlimactic manner. After 10 minutes, everyone walked out of the office. Mr. Shen followed Lu Feng and was still talking about building signal towers. Domestic BTS base stations are only half the price of foreign countries, with a maximum of 20 yuan. It can be done for 50,000 yuan, which is 250 million based on the number of 1,000 seats. China Unicom is willing to pay half of it? Lu Feng glanced at Mr. Shen. As far as he knew, China Unicom was very poor when it was separated. Otherwise, its development would not have been mediocre in the past few years. How could a provincial branch have paid more than 100 million? Do you have so much cash? Lu Feng wondered. I went to the Ministry of Information Industry to cry. I still have some landline business in hand, which is almost enough. Mr. Shen seemed to have made a lot of determination and said in a deep voice, China Unicom needs an opportunity. It cannot succeed in the landline business. You have to overtake in corners. Lu Feng understood Mr. Shen's mood very well, but now he really didn't have time to accompany the development of a company, so he just smiled and said nothing. In the provincial hall, in a large villa, the door of the room opened and Secretary Li came out. He glanced outside and said, "The weather is nice. Secretary Zhao, please accompany me for a walk." Secretary Li moved his body on the flower path and talked about the recent situation in the province. He suddenly remembered something and asked, "By the way, what is the relationship between Lu Feng and Huan Yuewei?" "Oh, I was just going to report to you. It's a normal relationship, but this Lu Feng is quite interesting. The two have known each other for 6 or 7 years. During these 6 or 7 years, both of them have developed well, especially Lu Feng. The development speed is even more rocket-like. Back then in Suzhou, many people said that Lu Feng was the incarnation of Huan Yuewei. Secretary Zhao said with a smile. Incarnation? Jiafeng Group is so big, it only took 6 or 7 years, Secretary Li said with some disbelief. 5 years to be precise. He previously worked in a food company. Jiafeng started his business in Suzhou. He bought a Panda branch factory at a low price. There are many rumors in the market, but after checking, there is indeed no substantial transaction. We haven't contacted each other for a long time, Secretary Zhao said. Secretary Li nodded and strolled forward. After a while, he asked, "What do you think of the mobile phone business?" "Okay. It's really good," Secretary Zhao followed behind and said, "Inspections in overseas developed countries, the smooth flow of information is so convenient, but we don't have this foundation now. In addition, the China Post and Telecommunications Group has branched out to China Unicom. I have heard of several in 2018, we wanted to separate out telecommunications, but there was not much enthusiasm. It's not that I'm not enthusiastic, it's that I have disdain for the province. Local development is inseparable from postal and telecommunications services, but we can't fully cooperate with them, which is very detrimental to development." Secretary Li sighed and stopped talking. Secretary Zhao seemed to sense something from the sidelines. "They have a meeting in the city today, right? Call Huan Yuewei and ask him to come over." After Secretary Li ordered, he added, "Call that Lu Feng too." 10 minutes later, a call came to Huan Yuewei's office. Huan Yuewei answered the phone and said hello several times. He put down the phone and told his secretary to go to the reception room and call Lu Feng out. After a while, Lu Feng came out and saw Huan Yuewei. He stepped forward and asked, Does the province have any ideas? I don't know. We'll see when we get there. Huan Yue got in the car, thinking that he might really take action this time. The two of them drove away in the distance. Mr. Zhou returned to the company, and before he entered the office, the secretary ran over to him and said, "Your son is waiting for you in the office." Then that bastard didn't go to work. Mr. Zhou frowned slightly, looking a little displeased. He stretched out his hand to push the office door open, and saw a man in his 30s sitting inside, playing with the paper that was originally placed on the table. A watch. Seeing Mr. Zhou coming in, a smile appeared on his face and he said, "Dad, what are you doing? You don't work in the unit at this time, why do you come to me?" Mr. Zhou said, rather displeased. "Don't be idle all day long, do your job well." "Oh, there are a few deputy managers watching over there, and I have nothing to do, so I just want to come and see you," Xiao Zhou asked, gossiping. "Dad, I heard that something happened recently. Someone is here. Related household. What kind of relationship? Where did you hear about it?" Mr. Zhou stared at him and asked. "Everything has spread. I heard that he was a relative of Huan Yue. He wanted to get involved in the business, but you turned him back during a meeting in the province." Xiao Zhou asked curiously, "What's your background? You're here to step on the border. Why are there so many slang words in your mouth?" Mr. Zhou sat down, made himself a cup of tea, and said slowly, "I'm going to the city for a meeting today. I heard that this guy has a good relationship with Huan Yue." Mr. Zhou briefly explained the matter. He didn't care much about these things. Now he is more willing to take care of the postal and savings business. Telecom will definitely be separated in 2 years, and the landline is also a task target, otherwise he would be too lazy to do it. Woolen cloth. Dad, is there anything else going on here? Isn't it about Huan Yue? Isn't it about Secretary Li? Xiao Zhou asked. It has nothing to do with that. Everyone has his own way. How many years have I been here and how many years have they been here? Mr. Zhou snorted coldly. Ever since these two people were transferred here a few years ago, they have been causing trouble for him. Didn't he sit firmly on Diaotai for several years? Dad, how about leaving this matter to me? Since these two people want to push it, we can't offend it too much. We can still make a fortune, Xiao Zhou said very cleverly. What do you want to do? Mr. Zhou looked at him and said solemnly, "Don't give me any trouble." Definitely not. If he wants to access the network, he has no other choice but us. The 10 million network access fee is very expensive. That's because there is also the construction cost of the signal tower. If 10 million can solve the problem, the telecommunications business will be abandoned sooner or later. If you go out and increase your debt, that will be a matter for those who come after you, Xiao Zhou calculated. Latest website.